serving as the avatar for Producer Son on the official Medarot YouTube channel, and a returnee from the days of Medarot 4, it is SCM00 Wanderer, with a kit of Guard Provoke, Double Provoke, Tank Legs, and the leg ability of Super Armor, which grants an immunity to paralyze ailments a certain number of hits. Now, at first glance, I'm pretty sure when Wanderer was first designed for 4, it was going to be one of those models that was very quickly, easily forgettable and lost to the annals of history. But ever since the creation of the official Medarot YouTube channel, it seems like Producer Son has taken a particular liking to the sea cucumber type, and for the last 4 years or even more of reporting on official Medarot news has made that his official avatar that now everyone knows and loves, and it's nice to see him officially make a grand debut into the game where everyone can finally collect him and use him on their teams. Guard Provoke on the head skill is a brand new skill being introduced in the game. It's considered new, but not really anything new in particular to what it brings to the table. Basically, it's just guard boost, which is 50% to shoot and melee resist boost to self, plus provoke. And to explain the provoke part briefly from both his head and his arms, upon attacking the target, it will cast an ailment of taunt on that particular enemy. And while an enemy is affected by taunt, they will not be allowed to attack anyone else at all except that one particular enemy that afflicted it. So in the case of Wanderer, upon attacking the target, that means nobody else, they are not allowed to target anyone else but Wanderer himself as long as the effect remains active. This means that he does have the ability to kind of protect his friends without actually needing to step into true defense stance or defense skill territory, which is a very unique way to take on that protect your friends mentality. And I do have to give credit where it's due for Wanderer in that respect, that he is built to be relatively chunky and hold his own remarkably well, and to keep the damage low on everyone except himself, he can do so decently well as long as all effects are active and all attention is on him. Tank Legs means that he'll have very low mobility overall, but makes up for it with stellar damage reduction across the board. In particular, just because he is a tank leg, he will be packing an easy stackable 30% right off the top, no matter what kind of damage he takes. Plus, having very chunky defense stats at just shy of 1700 and a little over 1600 for his melee and his shoot resistant respectively means he's already going to be pretty hard to take down no matter what. In the armor department, he's also packing about 4500 for the head, about 43, almost 4400 per arm, and just over 5500 for the legs. So this sea cucumber, this little slug here, is going to be a very difficult one to take down. He's chunky, he's got a very high HP pool, he's got a ton of different ways to keep his damage as low as possible while in this form, and with the ability to put all the attention on him and off his allies, that does give him the ability to take a beating remarkably well as long as all the attention remains on him. Plus, this also is not even touching on Super Armor, which grants him an immunity to all paralyzed ailments a certain number of hits. That includes Freeze, Freeze Shot, Hyper Thunder, Thunder Shot, Hyper Thunder Shot, or even Tornado to a point as well. Anything that would stop an enemy in their tracks, Wanderer himself is immune to outright and entirely just by his particular legs being equipped. Now, in all other departments of what he brings to the table, he's really not overly aggressive, but given that he's designed to be basically a pseudo-tank, he really doesn't need to be aggressive. But despite that, he is still packing some pretty decent base power and stats. Heat and Cool usually sitting between low 600s to mid 500s, so not too shabby there. Base power floating around the 1500, 1550 mark isn't really too bad either, minus that head at over 1600. So realistically, the best course of action for using him as is would be to maybe start with Guard Provoke on the first target to get that guard boost up and running, then maybe resort to using just regular Provoke on everyone else after that. Now, for those that are in the loop or know Wanderer even before his days in Medarot S and the scene as Producer Son's avatar, he also is capable of meta-changing into a true slug sea cucumber type form, where he'll tuck in his body, lay down, and gain legs over treads. In this form, he exchanges his kit out entirely for a true defensive-oriented kit, with a mastery of Counter Guard, Mirror Guard, First Aid, Tank Legs maintained, but changes his ability for Trap Buster. which removes any active traps placed against the allied side of the field every time he completes a successful heat phase. Now, in this form, he absolutely will assume the role as that tank and defender as long as the action remains on him, which actually will tie decently well back into him being able to change back and forth as he pleases, especially given that none of his drives require any particular charge to use. Counter Guard, while in protective stance, will allow him to reflect any incoming melee attacks back to sender at 50% of the intended damage, at the cost that he only gets 2 charges, in contrast to most other guards, which will give you between 4 and 5, minus of course Perfect Guard or even Needle Guard, which is usually 1 or 2. Mirror Guard is the same way on Drive B, but instead of reversing melee attacks, Mirror Guard will reflect shooting attacks back to sender, which will round out Wanderer back in a stance that he can take either hit, and you have to really pay close attention to which stance he's in, because while he's in defensive stance, he will be intercepting all of attacks no matter what, but he will be reflecting one of them back to sender specifically. He just can't do both at the same time. First Aid on Drive C is a setup-based skill, and arguably one of the most well-rounded and most useful of the setup skills. But once active, it will place a repair plant on the field that, as long as it remains active, any user that comes up and finishes a heat phase and has a broken part will have that part restored to them back at 10% HP, which will kind of give him a little bit more of a mastery in part sustain and extended survivability to a point as long as it remains in effect. Of course, tank legs also means that while his mobility will be remarkably low in the mid 600s, which isn't actually terrible for tank legs, it's actually kind of on the upper end, he does actually buff his resistances by about 400 each, sitting at about 600 or so in base form, so easily over 2,000 once he's changed. Plus, the damage reduction that he gets means he's going to be a very difficult slug to take down no matter what. And Trap Buster also means that anyone that tries to use passive aggression, melee trap, disturbance, shoot trap, head trap, charge trap, whatever the case may be, he will be able to remove it pretty reliably and prevent it from damaging any of his allies. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I kind of have to rate Wanderer a kind of a middle of the road 6.5 out of 10. But some arguments could even be made for a 7, maybe even a 7.5 to some degree, primarily for the sense that his change mode and his normal mode actually synergize remarkably well together. Provoke will guarantee that all attention remains on him and off his allies, unless it's an AoE type of attack, and being able to use Provoke, have that high damage reduction, and then transform into a tank guarantees that he's going to be taking every blow that lands no matter what, whether they try to bypass him or not. And First Aid also guarantees that he can help keep people alive on the field as long as that plant does remain in effect. The only real downside to Wanderer in this case is that because Provoke is considered an ailment, it can be removed or negated by anyone using Stat Cleanse. So if they do bring that to the table, Wanderer might have a little bit tougher of a time trying to keep the attention on him because it's an ailment that can be removed relatively quickly as long as Stat Cleanse is used quickly before Taunt is used too many times. As mixed parts though, I do have to rate him notably lower at a 5 out of 10. Primarily for the instance that even though he is pretty tanky on his own and can hold and can take a pretty solid beating, Provoke, like I said, as an ailment can be countered and circumvented decently quickly, but you're also missing out on the First Aid and the Trap Buster and even the guards that he can use to really draw out what he brings to the table as a pseudo-tank into a true tank, being able to change back and forth.